America, here we are again. Another mass shooting.
Mass shooting.
Mass shooting.
Mass shooting.
It has to stop.
Gun violence, currently one of America's biggest problems. Since 2022, over 48,000 people have died to gun violence, and an estimated 132 people die from it every day. Around 4.5 million American children live in a home where a firearm is loaded and accessible, increasing the risk of purposeful and accidental harm. But what supports this access to firearms?
The answer lies in the Second Amendment, originally ratified in 1791 to support the establishment of a well-regulated militia for purposes of national defense. The Second Amendment is now interpreted by the courts to affirm an individual's rights to bear arms.
When it comes to the Second Amendment, our founding fathers and its inclusion in the Bill of Rights, I think it has a lot to do with the nature of America at its foundation. Much of the country had yet to be settled. There was not a significant standing army. There was not a police force. And so I think it was really important that citizens have the right that could not be infringed by their government to be able to protect themselves, to protect their families, and to protect their homes.
While this amendment is a basic part of American rights, the way it is used may contribute to the prevalence of suicides, homicides, mass shootings, and other forms of gun violence.
And there are some pretty common sense steps that we could take that wouldn't prevent every instance of gun violence, but would certainly reduce the likelihood that it would continue to happen.
Some people use the Second Amendment as an excuse to own far more guns than people need, even using it as an excuse to own weapons of war. The Second Amendment, written in a different time and in a different context, was never intended to justify weapons of war or excessive numbers of firearms for civilians. Originally, the founders of this amendment were trying to ensure security for the nation and the right to self-defense, not to create a situation where too many dangerous weapons put lives at risk.
The Second Amendment, like any amendment in the Constitution, like any right that is protected in this country, is not an absolute right. Another famous amendment is the First Amendment. It's freedom of speech. But you cannot, for example, yell fire in a crowded movie theater if there is no fire, just because you have protection under the First Amendment. Because if you yelled fire and everyone panics and people run over each other, people could get hurt, they could die. So there's a protection against that. That's illegal. You can't do that. In the same way, there are reasonable protections within the Second Amendment. You can't own a machine gun, a bazooka, a tank. So we have common sense limits to our amendments, including the Second Amendment.
It is important to make gun ownership safer and closer to what the founders originally intended it to be.
Because it was drafted in the wake of a war. And it was not an effort to protect anybody from having a gun at any time. I understand that some people think that that's its purpose now, and they can argue that if they'd like. But what they can't say, or they shouldn't say, is that when drafted, it was imagined to allow anybody to have a gun at any time.
More than any other person or entity, the National Rifle Association, or NRA, has shifted public and legal opinion on the meaning of the Second Amendment to support individual gun rights instead of their old opinion.
For most of its history, the National Rifle Association was a rifle association. That it was an association of mostly rifle owners who were interested primarily in hunting. It did not try to lobby for the idea that everyone should get to own whatever firearms they want. Indeed, that wasn't the NRA's position until the 1970s.
This common view in favor of gun control began to change in the middle of the 20th century because of the NRA. During this time, the NRA changed their mission from being focused on gun safety to being more of a political group and changing legal views on how the Second Amendment is viewed. As we mentioned earlier, the Second Amendment was created for the safety of the country and for militias, not for the personal right of people to own a gun, which is what people think it is today.
If you want to say, like the NRA often does, that the Second Amendment has always been interpreted to support a personal gun right, you are lying. That is not true. It is a lie.
Many gun violence incidents are also related to hate crimes. A hate crime is a criminal act against an individual or group that is meant to target a certain race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, national origin, etc. There are an average of 25,000 hate crimes related to gun violence each year, and about 70 a day. A well-known example of a hate crime was the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida back in 2016. The perpetrator of this mass casualty was an extremist, and he aimed to target members of the LGBTQ+ community, which tragically led to the deaths of 49 people, with 58 others being injured. Unfortunately, that is not the only way gun violence has been related to hate crimes. Police brutality is another major example of hate crime relating to gun violence involving racism. 93% of civilian deaths caused by police are with a firearm, and African Americans are 3 times as likely to be shot by police than a white person.
Another big form of mass shootings that take place in the United States are school shootings. School shootings are some of the most horrific and sickening things that people do with guns. Columbine was a terrible school shooting that took place in Aurora, Colorado on April 20th, 1999, when 2 teenagers went into their high school and killed 15 people and wounded 21 others.
What you heard then is the same thing that you heard after every other school shooting, which is this can't happen again.
Columbine was one of the first major school shootings, and it should have served as a lesson, but we did not do enough to prevent future incidents. School shootings are still happening at an alarming rate.
Background checks have been an important part in making sure certain people with criminal history do not get their hands on weapons to do harmful things with them. Many leaders and politicians have insisted to use universal background checks, which don't just cover gun stores but cover gun shows and private gun sales. Some say a solution to this is the licensing system.
The licensing system is a system in which people must attend a firearm safety course and pass a 4 to 6 hour training that teaches people laws of guns to get a license. Then they go to a police station and fill out a form, give their fingerprint, and then law enforcement agencies' databases are checked.
Red flag laws could also be a solution to this problem. Red flag laws are laws that can prevent shootings by calling in suspicious behavior.
I have an example when it comes to red flag laws. There was someone who came to our community from another part of Texas in 2019, and with a high-power assault weapon, an AK-47 or variant of an AK-47, walked into a Walmart in El Paso and ultimately ended up killing 23 people in a matter of minutes. The killer's mother, when she found that her son had ordered this AK-47, a weapon that was originally designed and engineered and used in war because it's supposed to be incredibly effective at killing people, when she found that her son had ordered this gun before the shooting, she called the police in their hometown of Allen, Texas, and she asked for help because she was confused by her son's actions and worried about what he might do with that gun. But because we don't have a red flag law in Texas, that person's mother was told by the police in Allen, Texas that she was on her own and they wished her luck. Not too long after that conversation with the police, he drove 600 miles from Allen, Texas to El Paso, walked into that Walmart in August of 2019, opened fire on innocent people from our community, and ended up killing 23 of them. A red flag law potentially could have saved every single one of those lost lives in El Paso.
Over the past 80 years, politicians have debated gun control measures like assault weapon bans, universal background checks, and red flag laws.
I think that as best we can, especially now, we should try to act based on what we know. I do think there's some evidence that both the red flag laws and the background checks can be effective in the sense of reducing gun violence, but I also think it would be a mistake to exaggerate what they can do. And I think some people that want reasonable gun control, like myself, have made that error. So you should be able to say in the same breath that you support measures like that, but they're not panaceas. They are not going to make the problem go away. Our hope is that they will reduce it, but that's the best that they can do. And we shouldn't exaggerate in our own minds what they can accomplish.
Although there is no law or solution that will make all parties perfectly happy, it is important to make sure that gun ownership is safer and closer to what the founders originally intended it to be. We need to ensure that people are using their right with as much responsibility as possible. In addition, the government needs to take action and realize that society has evolved and stricter gun measures need to be enforced to protect us in our future.